Hello, and welcome to Lamplighter, day number 19. Today in our reading, we continue the fascinating story of the life of Joseph. If you recall from yesterday's readings, Joseph's brothers have come to Egypt from the land of Canaan in order to buy grain during the time of famine. Their families are starving, and they know that Egypt has plenty of grain and to spare. So they've traveled to Egypt to buy grain, certainly never expecting that they will have this encounter with their long-lost brother, Joseph. Now, we're told in the text that Joseph recognizes his brothers immediately, but they do not recognize him. That may cause us at first to scratch our heads and wonder, why don't they recognize their own brother? Well, more than likely, it has been somewhere around 13 years since they sold him into slavery, and they have assumed that he is either locked away in some prison somewhere or probably, and more likely, dead. They certainly would never expect to see him in this most powerful position, second only to the Pharaoh in Egypt. Well, Joseph recognizes his brothers. He's going to give them some grain, but he begins to question them. And he finds out about their father back in the land of Canaan. He finds out about their brother that they say is no more, that being he himself, Joseph. And he finds out that there is a younger brother, a brother of his same mother, that is back with his father. Joseph, of course, wants to see Benjamin, and so he sends the men back with grain in their sacks, and he says, "Don't come back unless you bring your brother with you." Well, they say, "Our brother will never come because our father loves him too dearly and will never let him go." So the brothers leave Egypt with grain in their sacks, and on the way they open their sacks and discover that they all have the silver that was supposed to be paid for the grain. And immediately they begin to grouse among themselves, what is going on? And remember how we're always seeing God at work in the stories that we're reading? Notice how they speak of God here in a fairly negative way on page 83 near the bottom of the page. When they discover this silver in their sacks, their hearts sank and they turned to each other trembling and said, "What is this that God has done to us?" What is this that God has done to us? They feel like God has turned against them. Now, why would they accuse God or think of God as turning against them? Well, would you say it might be a guilty conscience? They are remembering what they did to their brother. As a matter of fact, just a few paragraphs earlier than that, we were given some information that we weren't given earlier, some kind of eye-opening information about the way that whole transaction with Joseph went down. If you look in the section entitled Reuben's Support Indicated, we read there that they said to one another, "Surely we are being punished because of our brother." And notice this, "We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life, but we would not listen. That's why this distress has come upon us." That's a bit eye-opening, isn't it? Joseph is begging them for his life to be spared, and they refuse to listen to him. That's pretty hard. That's pretty cruel. And now they are feeling the guilt from that. If you read on, Reuben replied, "Didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you wouldn't listen." Reuben was the one that was trying his best against his brother's wishes to protect Joseph's life. And now everything has turned. They start to blame God because of the guilt they feel for the way they've treated their brother. Well, as you read on, you see that they go back to their father. Their father refuses to send Benjamin back with them. But then the time comes when they have to have some more food or they're going to die. And so reluctantly, Jacob, who believes that Benjamin, by the way, is the only son he has left. What does that say about the favoritism we have discovered earlier in our reading? But finally, Jacob relents and says, "We've got to survive. I'll send Benjamin back with you." Judah makes a promise, his life for the life of Benjamin, he will bring him back. So whenever they begin their journey back, they say to themselves, maybe this whole thing with the silver was a mistake. And Jacob even says, "Take your brother also and go back to the man at once, and may God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, so that he will let your other brother and Benjamin come back with you. Jacob is hoping and praying that God Almighty will deliver his sons back to him alive and well. Whenever the men get back to Egypt, they find Joseph's stewards and they tell him what's happened with the money. They had no intention to take the money back with them. They don't want to be thought of as thieves. And it's interesting what the steward of Joseph says about the middle of the page on page 85. He says, "It's all right. Don't be afraid." Now listen to this. "Your God, the God of your father, has given you treasure in your sacks. I received your silver." It's the steward of Joseph that's saying, this is the hand of God. God is actually blessing you. Now, they were ready to shake a fist at God and curse God, but the steward of Joseph says, oh no, God is blessing you. And then Joseph meets his brothers. He meets Benjamin. He gives a feast for them. He gives Benjamin special treatment. And he even says to Benjamin, "God be gracious to you, my son." Ultimately, Joseph reveals his identity to his brothers. They are in complete shock, as you might well imagine. And they're fearful. Wouldn't you be afraid? If there was ever a time when Joseph could get vengeance, this would be it. He's in a position of power. He could destroy them. And now they are fearful for their lives. But I want you to notice the attitude Joseph takes. I'm now on page 87 of our reading today. Joseph said to his brothers, "Come close to me." When they had done so, he said, "I'm your brother Joseph. I'm the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because," ready for this? "It was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will not be plowing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So then it was not you who sent me here, but God who made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, and ruler of all Egypt." You see Joseph's attitude? Don't worry. I'm not going to destroy you. I'm not going to get even. This whole scenario has been the hand of God. God brought me here. You didn't. God made sure I got to this position. You didn't. God is the one who is saving you through me. This is all a story, Joseph would say, that's much bigger than me. It's much bigger than you, my brothers. It's much bigger than my father. Here we go. This is a story about God. That's why it's so important for us even today when we read the Bible to keep in mind it is always about God. And the question we must ask ourselves today is, what is God busy doing in my life? What is God busy doing in your life? Because the story, even today, the story of your life, the story of my life, is a story about God. His word is a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. May you have a blessed day.